Hi folks, this is Don Meissner with the North Country Fishing Report. You know, with this thaw that we've had recently, it's affected me a lot, and it's made me think how much I can't wait till trout season starts. And that starts basically April 1st is when the state allows you to go trout fishing in all our streams. And there are some exceptions. You know, there's different regulations on some waters. So it's really important that you get the state guide that will tell you about all the trout waters and what the limits are in catching the fish there. But what I really want to talk about, I think a lot of you might listen and think that, you know, to be a good trout fisherman, you almost have to be a fly fisherman. And granted, a big part of trout's diet is underwater or on the surface flies and insects. But that isn't all. They'll eat anything that's in their environment. And I got to tell you that it isn't that difficult to be a good fly fisherman. But we'll talk about that later. But as we start a new season, the water's going to be cold, it's going to be high, and those fish aren't going to be really that active. So I think for those of us that don't want to use live bait, there's things that we can use that sort of imitate live bait to fish. And in the early part of the season, you know, anything, one of the baits that has worked so well for me, it's called a trout magnet. And it's just a little lure a soft plastic lure like you would fish for crappies or panfish. It's just a little tiny thing, and they recommend you use a float on it. But the key here is for you to figure a way to be able to use this and allow it to float naturally down in the current, like you try to make your nymphs when you're fly fishing do. The same exact thing. And I've had wonderful luck on this. And you can use any kind of little plastic, like a little plastic tube, soft plastic tube. I've told you about this before. Well, one of them that has worked wonderfully for me is just a tiny little tube, 1/32 of an ounce, but it has a tail on it coming out the middle of it. And it's called an atomic teaser. And you can find this in any tackle store or online. It's been a great bait for me. The thing you have to remember is if you're using soft plastics and trying to make them look like something live that the fish would eat, that those fish, when they take those in, they aren't going to just gobble on them and chew on them and so forth like they would live bait. So you've got to be able to set the hook and feel the strike immediately. It's different. If you're using worms, those fish, they'll keep eating it until they swallow it. So it's a lot more difficult to become a good fisherman doing this than relying on just throwing your worm out there and letting it sit on the bottom. But I think it's important to understand this. You know, when season begins, for those of us that don't want to use live bait, another good bet would be to use a tiny little spinner or a little spoon. And trout really react to bright, flashy things. And my favorite is a 1/16 or 1/32 ounce Panther Martin spinner. It's a tiny little spinner with a little blade on it, and it makes a great vibration. It comes in just plain brass or silver or gold, or they make some with little flies on the treble hook at the end. And these are the ones I've really had wonderful luck in. And I've talked to a lot of people, and this is one of their favorite things they use in the early season. If you can go to any one of our waters and use a little spinner like this, and you're probably going to be successful. I highly recommend it. And for those of you that are new to trout fishing, just deal with it kind of like you would other kinds of fishing, like pan fishing or like smallmouth bass fishing. It's not all that different. Remember, they're fish, and they're going to eat whatever's around them. And if they're sharing the water with other species, probably all the fish in any body of water are going to be eating the same things. So we only have a few weeks now. We can start getting ready, and trout season will begin. And it's really something to look forward to, boy, especially for me. After the long winter we've all suffered. And I've been doing sports shows, and, you know, seeing people come in talking about fishing just has got me all back enthused about it like I was a kid again. Until next time, folks, this is Don Meissner with the North Country Fishing Report.